Hi there, everyone. Welcome back to Press for Truth. I'm your host, Dan Dix. Today we're going to be talking about a very important subject that's been getting a lot of attention from the alternative media anyways, and that's the case to reinstate the Bank of Canada. Now today we're joined on the line by economist and documentary filmmaker Bill Still. So sir, thank you very much for taking some time to speak with us today at Press for Truth.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Now, first of all, let me just say that The Money Masters was an amazing film. I just wanted to let you know that that truly was pivotal for me, monumental really in my whole awakening process, and it really helped me to understand the true nature of how we are being controlled and just how this is possible. But not only that, but how to hack at the root of the problem that is fractional reserve lending. So I just want to say thank you so much for putting together that monumental piece of work.
Well, you're welcome. It's not just fractional reserve lending is the problem. The probably a more important problem is the ability of the federal government to borrow money, because if the government can borrow money, then according to Proverbs, the borrower becomes servant to the lender. And therefore, since the group that buys the majority of the government bonds, which is how the government borrows money, the group that buys most of those are the large commercial banks. So therefore, you essentially have the large commercial banks controlling not only the financial process but the political process as well.
Right.
That's really the root of the problem, because from there, then they can go ahead and basically counterfeit U.S. money to whatever extent they want, and they can pretend that the Federal Reserve is in control of the process, and so therefore they're keeping them to a 10-to-1 reserve ratio and all this nonsense. But we saw, as a result of the 2008 congressional committee investigations of the crash of '08, that none of the banks were sticking to the 10% reserve ratio. J.P. Morgan and Citi and the other major banks were typically at about 2%. Freddie and Fannie were leveraged 80-to-1. Goldman Sachs was leveraged 333-to-1. So they were all way outside of what their reserve requirement was supposed to be. And of course, the Fed never let on or never told us about this. They're supposed to be the people controlling the banks, but no, that's not the case at all. It makes common sense if the Fed is a corporation and the only stockholders in that corporation are the nation's banks, well, it's impossible for for a corporation to go against its stockholders. So, and we see that in the revolving back door between the Fed and the banks. They come in and out of the Fed. They go into the large commercial banks. It's just really a joke.
Well, how significant is this case right now in Canada with Comer trying to reinstate the Bank of Canada? A lot of people don't really understand the differences between the banking system here in Canada compared to America. How significant is this case right now, do you think, for Canadians?
Well, it's very significant, because what actually happened, and I misinterpreted it a little bit in my first report and corrected it in the second report. What had happened was the government, Comer tried to sue the Bank of Canada because they were not operating according to their charter, namely that they were supposed to create government-issued debt-free money to the society, and that was always what they'd done in the past, and that's why little old Canada had become rather prosperous for a country of its size. The same thing happened with England back for some 700 years under the auspices of the tally sticks. England had very few resources, and yet, Britannica ruled the waves at the end of the 18th century. So, but in any case, the government had tried to claim that Comer and the other two plaintiffs could not sue the Bank of Canada for not sticking to their requirements. However, the lower court decided no, that's not the case. You can proceed with the suit. And then the government took it to a higher level, the appellate court, the federal court, and pressed their case again and said these people have no standing. They cannot sue the Bank of Canada to make them comply with their charter. Well, that was what happened just a little over a week ago. The federal court came down and said, no, that's not the case. This suit can proceed ahead.
Mm-hmm. Now, the suit is going to proceed, and it's going to be interesting to see what comes of this. But I'm curious as to, how do we deal with the fact that the chartered banks are still able to do fractional reserve lending? Because if the banks is able to lend to the government at 0% interest, isn't it possible that people are still just going to deposit those funds directly back into the commercial banks, and it's just going to feed the fractional lending system again? How can we get rid of the commercial bank's ability to fractionally lend?
Well, you can't do it all at once. It would cause a big upset. I like the Israeli model. I was ushered into the Knesset about 2 years ago and spoke to their head economist, a gentleman by the name of Mr. Braverman. And the Israeli monetary reformers know that we need a gradual plan, so they've boiled it down to with great simplicity, and that is, in the first year, instead of banks creating 95%, 97% of the national money supply, and the government only creating 3%. In the first year, let's say, banks would only be allowed to create 90% of the national money, and the federal government would create 10% of the national money, debt-free, spending that extra money on infrastructure projects that would benefit the broad population in general.
So it's almost like weaning a drug addict off of drugs slowly.
And I don't think in order for a nation to get off of this heroin type of addiction, that they need to declare essentially bankruptcy and not pay the outstanding bonds. I think we can do this gradually and do just fine. Then we run metrics, and in the second year, if it looked good, then they change the ratio again, and the government would create 20% of the money, and banks only 80, and then 30, and 70, and 50, and 50, and we could run metrics all along each year and see how it reacted, and that way we wouldn't go too far or whatever. We could hit the optimum rate, and I believe the optimum rate is probably banks creating zero and only serving as intermediaries between borrowers and lenders. But we can take a gradual approach, and it will be a great improvement over what we have today.
And so with the banks going down to zero interest rates,
well, it's not zero. It's not zero interest rate. That's not the question at all. It's zero creation of money, zero counterfeiting of the national money. In my perfect world, I would have banks only able to lend money that they actually had. In other words, what happens today when you close on a mortgage at the banker doesn't go in the back room and pull out a giant duffel bag full of $100 bills and lay it on the table and have you walk out. That would be real money that they had that they were lending out. No, what the banker does is just create little numbers in a computerized account and put those numbers, and at that instant, the banker is literally creating money out of nothing, and that's what we have to stop.
Creating money out of nothing, if that's what we have to stop, what I'm failing to understand isn't that what Comer is suggesting that the Bank of Canada do, is to continue to create money out of nothing?
No, they're asking that the Bank of Canada return to its chartered mandate, namely to actually create debt-free, government-issued money out of nothing. There's a big difference between creating money out of nothing that the government spends for the benefit of all citizens equally, and a bank creating money out of nothing at interest that gives them not only the profit on the money creation, but also gives them control of the quantity. And if they can lend that money they create out of nothing to the government and get the government addicted to that, then they also have control over the political process to ensure that no changes in the law will ever occur.
Is it possible this could set a precedent? It's quite possible this could set a ripple effect across the world. Could this potentially catch on with other banks around the world?
Oh, absolutely. There are lots of nations that are looking at this very strongly right now, and it just depends on which nation dips their toe in the water first, and then we run metrics and see that improves their economy, and then it's just going to be a domino effect, and within a couple of years, this whole austerity, horrible, debt-laden society could come crashing down into a prosperous new future.
Well, it seems like we've just gotten to that point where enough people are waking up to these issues that there is indeed a fundamental issue with our banking system, and perhaps monetary reform might be the only way that we can move towards greater liberty for everyone. And it looks like that's what we're moving towards. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I've seen tremendous progress just in the last few years, and I've been in this 25 years. So, yeah, it's catching on worldwide now, and one of these days, one of these nations is going to dip their toe in the water, and it's going to be a great day.
Absolutely. It's an exciting time to be involved with this. Where can people go to learn more from you, and what are you currently working on? Do you have anything that's coming out soon?
Not necessarily that's under contract for coming out, but I've been paid to write a screenplay, a fictionalization of a period piece during the time of the early 1900s, when the Federal Reserve Bill was passed, and J.P. Morgan and the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts and the Carnegies were all battling for power. It kind of shows what the roots of this problem are, and what the atmosphere was when the Federal Reserve Act was passed.
Very, very interesting. Well, I certainly hope you can interject some truth into this fictional piece and wake up whoever watches it to these issues that are very, very serious. So once again, sir, thank you very much for taking some time to speak with us today.
Thank you.